Hey, this is David Thompson, and this is the first in a series of overview videos that I'm going to make that just give a high-level overview of how to play Pavlov's House. So the first video, I'm going to talk about a few different things. I'm going to talk about the setup of the game, just a quick rundown of the sequence of play throughout the game, and then I'll end with the three different modes of the game. So for setup, the first thing you do is you sort all the different components. I've already done that for the most part here. I've left the last couple of steps that I just wanted to show quickly because I think it's important to understand how the game flows. So the first, the quickest thing we can do is go through the Soviet card deck. So this is the deck that's going to drive the operational level actions throughout the game. It's a 28 card deck plus an additional, and these are the actions that can be taken by the Soviet player, plus an additional 7 Fog of War cards. So at the beginning of the game, with those 7 cards, you're going to take 3 of them, add those to the Soviet deck, and then remove the other 4. These are out of play at the beginning of the game, and then we just shuffle that deck to start the game. And then the German card deck also needs to be set up. So at the beginning of the game, it's divided into 5 decks. We see the 5 here, they're numbered at the bottom. I've already sorted them out, so they're ready to go. So we're just going to flip them over. And then we have a deck of cards that have Resupply on one side and Storm Group on the other. And I'll explain what that means later on. But for now, for the purposes of just setting it up, we're going to shuffle these 6 cards. We're going to place 1 on top of the deck 4, 1 on top of deck 3, 1 on top of deck 2. And then we're going to stack these decks from highest to lowest, so that the lowest deck, deck number 1, is on the top. And that's it. If we were playing a competitive version of the game, and I'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about game modes, we would have included this extra card for the competitive mode, but we're not. So we're just going to walk through it as if it's a solitaire game. The 3 resupply cards we didn't use will also be taken out of the game. They're not used for this one. And then the last thing we have are these tactics cards. So there's 10 of these. We're going to be playing an elite level version of the solitaire game, so we're going to keep those handy. And that's it. So setup is ready to go. Other than just sorting through the components, the only other thing you really have to do to prepare the game is to set up the 4 counters that start in Pavlov's house and a couple of different supplies that go there. Okay, so that's set up. Now let's talk about very quickly how the game actually plays out. So it plays out in turns, and each turn is divided into 3 phases. And the 3 phases generally correlate to the board. So the first phase is the operational Soviet level phase, and that takes place here on the view of Stalingrad and the Volga River. The next phase is the Wehrmacht card phase, and that takes place here. This is an overview of 9 January Square, where the combat around Pavlov's house took place. And you can see that here on the board we've drawn it to the actual location of Stalingrad. And then the final phase of the game is the tactical phase, where we have the defenders of Stalingrad holding out against this German assault. So that happens here inside Pavlov's house. And again, we've drawn the line to Pavlov's house itself. So that's the very high level deconstruction of how it works. So I'll go into a little bit more detail. I'm going to follow up with subsequent videos about how all the individual actions take place. But for now, just so you know, in the Soviet card phase, you're going to draw 4 cards from the Soviet card deck. And each of the cards has 2 actions, with the exception of these Fog of War cards. Fog of War does nothing but fill up the deck. And so if you draw one of those, you can't actually take an action. So of the 4 cards you draw, you get to take 3 actions. You can only take 1 action from a card. So you can use any combination of these 3 cards to take your 3 actions, but you can't take 2 actions from the same card. Okay, so again, we'll talk about this in greater detail in a later video. After that's done, we'll move to the Wehrmacht card phase, or the German card phase. The first thing we'll do is we're actually going to draw 2 tactics cards. You use the tactics cards in the higher level difficulty versions of the game. So these cards are boosts, essentially, things that make the German cards more potent during this phase. So we have a couple of different things where these would increase the ability of infantry and armor to attack during this phase if that were to occur. Then we're going to draw 3 cards from the deck, and we're going to resolve them one at a time. So we'll flip this over. This is telling us to place a counter on the board. This one's telling us to bomb parts of Stalingrad, and this one is telling us to attack Pavlov's house with artillery. Again, we'll cover them in greater detail later on. And then the final part of the game, or the final part of the turn, is the Soviet counter phase. So that's the tactical level action here. And so at the beginning of this phase, you'll have 3 actions where you can move counters. So you can move 3 different counters into the house. And then after that, you have 3 actions that you can take. And there's all sorts of different actions based on the type of counter. We can attack, we can suppress, we can use anti-tank riflemen, we can call in for reinforcements. There's a long list of actions, but we'll cover those in greater detail later. Let's just say for now, each of these took 3 actions. We would place action tokens on them as we were taking them to mark that they've been used that turn. And then at the end of the round, you would clear all those tokens. Okay, so that's a very, very high level how the game plays out. You would repeat that process through, until this deck of German cards is exhausted. Once that happens, the game ends. If there are multiple ways the game can end earlier than that, if that happens, though, that means that the Soviet player has lost. If the Soviet player makes it to the end of the deck and has accrued enough points through maintaining control of not only the square here, but also performing storm group assaults, then the Soviet player will win, and there's different levels of how well you've done when you win. Okay, so let's talk about the 3 different modes. So originally Pavlov's House was designed as a solitaire-only game. In the solitaire, it was going to be just the tactical defense of Pavlov's House. As the operational level elements of the game grew over time, it became clear that it lent itself well not only to solitaire play, but also 2-player cooperative. So the base level version of the game is solitaire or 2-player cooperative, where one Soviet player takes on the role of the operational level assets, and the other one takes on the tactical defense of the building. However, we've added a 3-player variant, or 2 or 3-player variant, where you actually have a player playing the German cards. And it's essentially their decisions are driven by which tactics cards they want to use, and they have some control over the German cards that will be used each turn. Okay, so that was the setup, the game overview, and the different modes of play. So in subsequent videos, I'll talk about each of the phases in more detail. And thanks for watching.